I'm just going to start off with something easy, which is
Yeah.
why Muskingum County? Like, you were originally from Washington or Oregon?
Oregon.
Oregon.
Originally, I was from Oregon, or I guess I still am. Originally from Oregon.
Right.
And I grew up there. I went to undergrad in Oregon as well. And then I ventured outward to kind of reverse the Oregon Trail that my ancestors forged. And, I went back to St. Louis, actually, for graduate school.
Okay.
And that's where I got my MFA in photography and digital media. And from there, I started teaching
Okay.
at different universities. Right. My first teaching job was actually the University of Denver School of Art and Art History. I did that for a while,
That's
worked
cool.
in a gallery there. Just kind of starting my career in education. And then I went to Bucknell University and was there for a year as a visiting assistant professor. So I kind of moved around a lot. And then I was kind of applying for other academic jobs. Moved to Ohio because my family had actually moved here. My stepdad is from the area.
Okay.
So they all moved out here. And I was like, well, they're close. I was just in Pennsylvania. So I popped over and got just a job at the Lincoln County Library, actually, is a branch clerk at the Hebron Branch Library, which is literally in the middle of a cornfield.
Really?
Yeah, it really is. Like, you go out the back doors, and it's like in these municipal building, and it's just corn. So it was a big change for me, but I realized really quickly that I actually loved working in libraries.
Okay.
So yeah.
Before you were working as an art history teacher, or what were you
I
teaching?
taught studio art.
Studio art.
I taught a lot of like photography, video, digital media.
Okay.
There was some mixed media in there as well. I've also taught some drawing and painting as well.
Now, has much of that transferred to library, like the work at the library?
The drawing and painting, not so much. But the video work and the artwork itself, absolutely. Because, really the foundation of, the arts is about visual communication.
Right.
And that has a lot of value across a whole bunch of different, fields. And so I guess I didn't realize how well my degree would transfer into libraries until I started working in libraries. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, this makes sense. This works really well. So I was working at Lincoln County Library as the emerging technologies person there. And then a job opened up at Muskingum. And Muskingum County Library System, I applied and was really, lucky enough to get that. And then they opened up a marketing and community relations director position. And I was like, I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And would fit actually even a little bit better. So
Cool.
That's how I ended up here. It's a little bit of a trail, but it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. And I like hearing how people get fit into, like, when you have like this broad spectrum of art. I like digital art. I like digital communication. I like the storytelling that comes with that, and then fitting it to some place that helps people and that's actually involves other people and gives enjoyment to the community and stuff like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that in a lot in the fine arts community, when people are being like, oh, marketing, are you using your art powers for evil? But I'm also like, no, I really don't think that. Especially because of the institution that I get to work for.
Right.
I get to spend my days promoting an institution that I love and promoting reading and literacy and the community itself. Public libraries have really transformed themselves from being book museums into these really vibrant community, hearts and hubs, as well as providing just an incredible amount of digital access. And of course, the foundation is still our physical collection as well. So I just feel really lucky that I get to kind of utilize my skill sets for something that I really care about.
That's really cool. I want to get back to the library in just a minute.
Okay, yeah.
But we did talk, the first time we met, it was on the commercial shoot for the library. But we talked about something really interesting that I think other people would be really interested in as well. You did some documentary work before you started working for the library.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think one of the more interesting documentary projects that I worked on was actually, I replaced or filled in, I guess, for a woman by the name of Tulu Bayar. She is the full-time faculty member at Bucknell.
So it was in
Yeah, it was in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And at the tail end of that, as I was kind of transitioning, out, she was talking about doing this incredible documentary project about the Uyghurs up in northwestern China.
Right.
She is originally from Turkey, and there's a lot of connections between the Uyghurs and Turkish people and Turkish culture as well. There's some strong parallels there. And so she was connected with that community, and she asked me to basically be another person on the documentary. So she hired me to do that, and it was a completely life-changing event. So I mean, just this, there's so much strife happening right now, and what had happened right before, within the Uyghur community up in northwestern China. There's a lot of persecution of these individuals, and so we had to be very, very careful as to how we were.
Could you explain a little bit about like what is going on with the Uyghurs? I mean, it is kind of, I had to explain it, I think, to Katie the other day.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese government would very much like it to be even more, unknown. But
yeah. So it is a strong parallel to what happened, in Tibet with the Buddhists as well. It was essentially religious persecution. Uyghurs are Muslim. And so it's a Muslim part of China. It's up by, I believe it's Uzbekistan and all of that as well. So it's not what you would traditionally think of as China.
Right.
And just kind of engaging with, the people. It's a very distinct culture. And, I think a lot of, the majority in China is, they really want it to be less religious across the whole country. So there's a lot of persecution on cultural issues, and a lot of it centers around, their religion and their faith as well. And so people were being imprisoned and, harassed and otherwise, denigrated because of their beliefs. There have been quite a few uprisings, actually. I think it was about a year and a half before we went there. There was a bit of an uprising, and they had loosened or stopped, I guess, some of the actual kind of raid type things that they were doing.
Okay.
So there was a party, for example, a ceremony or party called the Dalan.
Okay.
And at least that's what they called that, and that they threw this like really incredible celebration where there was lots of dancing and food and music, and it was really special because that was prohibited for a very long time to even have those kind of Dolan celebrations.
So there was an uprising, and then the regulations were
less enforced, I think, is like, so they weren't supposed to have these kind of, specific cultural activities and, honoring their own heritage and culture. But they had loosened that up just a little bit as far as, I think, the enforcement. Since then, that has changed.
Gotcha.
So I feel really fortunate that they were able to, that they felt comfortable and that they wanted to share that with us.
So what did you actually do when you went over?
So like the whole trip in China?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So that was something. So we flew into Beijing, because you have to fly into like major hubs, and then from there you can connect to these smaller, more regional airports. And so we flew up to Urumqi and the Kashgar region, which is it's near the Taklamakan Desert, which is kind of, again, way up northwestern China. Actually, there was a moment where I think I thought we were going to die, and I'm pretty sure Tulu thought so too, but we were trying to like reassure each other that we were not going to die. And it was, so I'm used to turbulence. I've flown before, I've flown in small planes before too. As a kid, I used to fly across the Cascades all the time to see family, because I was born in Bend, Oregon, which is on the eastern side of the Cascades. Mostly grew up in the Willamette Valley, so to see my dad and grandmother, I'd fly. So I was used to small planes with a lot of turbulence. It happens. This was very different. We were flying in, I think, to Kashgar, and we were flying in and landing as a sandstorm was hitting. And there was a lot of side to side movement, which I was not as accustomed to with turbulence. I was like, I don't think that's supposed to happen. And like Tulu was like sitting right next to me. We were like holding each other's hands and just like breathing and both saying like, it's going to be fine. 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 Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, I just told my family I am out of communication completely for 2 weeks. They're going to hear about a plane going down and be worried, and I'm going to die. And then, what's going to happen to my family isn't going to know for a while. And then Tulu at the same time was like, how are they going to get our bodies back to the United States? Was what was running through her head. So that's kind of, and it must not have been as severe as I thought it was, because I'll never forget this woman's face. There was this Uyghur woman actually like just sitting, just smiling at us directly, just like
just right next to you.
Yeah, just like right across the aisle, just kind of like smiling and laughing at us as we like breathe deeply and contemplate our existence. So that was, I thought to myself, I'm like, that woman's face is going to be the last thing I see.
It'd be a hard thing to rationalize. Like, it's not like you have a whole bunch of stories of people landing in sandstorms and being tossed side to side and everything.
Right? Yeah, it was a bumpy ride. We got in, we made it. Obviously, I am still here. There was another.
It'd be a very different podcast if you weren't still here and still talking to me.
I mean, maybe you'll find out later. It'll be one of those types of ghost stories. There was another kind of moment where there was some people who were following us, basically. We'd be very careful, like who we talk to, because then the people we're interviewing can get in trouble, which is ultimately why why the documentary was not completed. Right. Is for fear of the people that we interviewed, that we videoed and we photographed, that we felt like that they're at that time when Tulu was ready to kind of utilize all of the footage that we captured. It was kind of discovered that it's like, if we do this, or if this is done, it could really hurt the community that we wanted to actually highlight and talk about and honor. Right. And, a documentary isn't worth someone's life. So we wanted to be really sensitive to that. It was a wonderful experience. The footage, I'm assuming, still exists out there. I don't have it because I was hired to, help create the content, and then Tulu would have taken that and created shows, like photography shows, and also created a video documentary. So maybe at some point, I'm glad that the photographs exist as well, right? Just for posterity, in case this culture is taken out, basically.
How were you able to get around? I mean, like I've always assumed that when you go to China, you were kind of assigned a handler or something like that keeps you from doing anything against the best interests of the party or whatever.
So that is accurate. We had we had a driver and we had a translator. Okay. Within that budget, we actually, the budget that was created, there was actually monies that we could use to help make things happen. So, for example, there was a hotel that only locals were able to stay in, that tourists were not supposed to stay there. Gotcha. But we were able to essentially kind of buy our way in to be able to stay in this hotel, because I think it was the only one up there, which is probably also meant to discourage tourists. So we did have those two individuals with us, the driver and our translator, but they also acted as like people that would kind of interface with local government officials and things like that. And basically the bribery budget. We had a bribery budget. Let's just call it what it is. I'm like dancing around it. I don't know why. Are they gonna find me? Like, so we're basically paying that off. But there was definitely a moment. I think there might have actually several moments where our kind of our translator, who'd more be like our handler type thing, was like, we're going now, and we just would leave that city or that place. Gotcha. Because they were kind of keeping an eye on that. He was connected, with more officials around the area, and so he kind of had a more of an inside track.
That was for your
So-
benefit or the government's benefit that he would say
Our
you have to leave.
benefit.
Okay.
Our benefit. So we didn't have like a specific handler, like as far as like a government official. We probably were supposed to, so it was actually pretty dangerous what we were doing. We were basically, we were looking like tourists. We bought a fake wedding. We bought fake wedding rings. Tulu is married, but we bought just cheap,
Right.
rings. And I think, that was part of it, is because, Tulu going and being out there on her own as a woman in that region would have been an issue. But, if she has someone, and also, I look very American. I'm this hulking white man. So it also kind of verifies that whole tourism type of thing, because people are allowed to go, into that region and, explore, but it's not as encouraged,
Right.
to see and to be in that area. But yeah, there were some interesting moments. One time we crossed a bridge in the middle of the desert that was just floating logs that were tied together.
Okay.
For some reason, I thought that with the driver itself, when you're in the middle of the desert, you'd have those SUVs or something, or I don't know. It was
Cruising
just
through the desert in the Land Rover.
yeah, but no, it was just like a car. It was just like a little sedan that we were just
Riding over some logs.
going through tunnels, and people would have to leave the tunnel before we could get through, because it was just
Right.
absolutely insane to kind of experience all of that. But it's beautiful. It's incredible.
You said you never got the documentary never got to be released or anything like that, because it was locked down more after you came back. Or
Yeah. So when we came back, we had all the footage, and Tulu is more connected with American Uyghurs, and I think that in her conversations with them, that's when it was kind of decided that this documentary project might actually do a lot more damage than good
Gotcha.
at that time. So she made the decision to not move forward with the documentary.
Right.
I understand it. I respect that decision for sure. I do have, so when I was not on duty, with the big professional cameras, I was allowed to take photos with my cell phone.
Gotcha.
And kind of own the rights to those specifically. But it, was very far and few between, just because, I was hired to do a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to make sure that we really captured that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But, there was this Dolan dance that was just so, it was I'm trying to see if I could describe it. It was they had a rope, and it was one person would spin and the other person would spin, and then they would hit you with the rope, and you tried to grab it.
Sounds
Right.
painful.
It can be. And then you try to get it away from them and hit them to keep on playing back and forth, or you pick someone else that you want to kind of do that with. And in some ways it is, I think it's not entirely, but it is a little bit tied to courtship as well in certain ways, is what they tried to explain to me. So it was, I don't know, it was really fun.
Just an interesting people that are being kind of repressed by the government.
Yeah.
Has it gotten any better since then, or
No.
the whole situation? No, just
No.
continually worse.
Yeah, it's continually, last time, I think there was pretty recently actually in the news something about, conflict happening up in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region.
I mean, I've heard about forced sterilization.
Mhm.
There's been at least
Bad
one
stuff.
place I saw there'd been over 1 million Uyghurs that have been detained in various, and I mean, you've heard of the concentration camps,
Yeah.
the way that's being described now. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, and when we had interviews, people were very hesitant,
Right.
and scared, and a lot of our interviews fell through, and I get that. I absolutely do. So the persecution continues, and I think it's something that people just don't. With everything that's happening in the world, it is difficult to kind of get attention on that, especially because of how remote that region truly is.
Right.
You know, it is exceptionally isolated up there, geographically and culturally. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Especially in China.
yeah,
At this point in time. Goodness.
But there was one thing that I'll share with you that I forget. I wish I remember the name of the city, but it's this ancient, like thousands of years old, or at least 1,000 years old. This kind of walled city that's out in the middle of the desert that we went into, and it was just like this kind of outcropping, and it was all walled in, and it was just like families and generations of this culture and these people had just occupied this space for such a long time, and it was like this labyrinth of a maze. And then we were welcomed into one of their homes, and just to see the way that they cooked and slept and lived and just functioned was, I mean, I felt like I was time traveling at some point, you know, certain times during this as well. So
that's cool. How old was that city?
Oh, I wish I knew exactly. I remember them saying it was over 1,000 years old,
and they've been continuously inhabiting it for like 1,000 years.
I would want to like look it up to verify the interlibrary person in me wants to verify that information, but I know it was mind-blowingly old, and that it had been continuously occupied.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was amazing to see, because you really do like step. It's like you're stepping back in time. You know, I was like, this looks like something from Game of Thrones. What's happening? You know, so it was pretty cool.
Besides the whole government, the government persecution thing, I would love to go. I mean, China has some of the coolest topography, the coolest geography, and pretty cool, pretty amazing culture too. I would love to be able to go over there, but it just kind of spooks me like a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the, you know, to be perfectly transparent, like we were not necessarily authorized to go to the region that we were in. I think we were mostly authorized to spend time in and around the Beijing area, in which we spent like a day when we arrived and a day on our way out. So I don't really know if I was fully aware of the amount of risk involved when I signed up for the project, but you know, it was definitely a once in a lifetime type of experience. Although, you know, if I have friends or acquaintances that have gone to China as well, I have no similarities that I can share with them in the way that they experienced China versus the way that I experienced it.
Right.
You know, I didn't go into any of the, you know, the tourist
prepared tourist spots.
Exactly. So my interpretation of China is very different from the way a lot of other people have experienced that country. So
that would definitely parallel the way the Uyghurs feel about living in China, I'm sure.
I mean, just to kind of illustrate it, like we would pull into these small towns, villages, and the community would just come out and make a circle around the car. It would just be like a crowd of people that would just come in and surround the car, because from my interpretation, I might have been like the first Westerner that they had seen in person. Now, there's certain shows and television, they all thought that I spoke Mandarin because I was from the West and America, and they thought that all Americans also spoke Mandarin because all the shows and TV and movies are all dubbed in Mandarin. So, you know, that's why I was just like, I'm sorry, I do not speak, you know, Mandarin. But it was a little unnerving at sometimes to like pull into like this, you know, tiny little village in the middle of the desert or on the outskirts of the desert, and then immediately have like the whole town surrounding you, just out of curiosity. I used to like say that I was joking around, being like, I'm Kashgar famous. Because like people would just come up to me and just like take a picture of me without. I was like, oh my god, I'm a celebrity. But it was so weird. Some people would ask if they could take a picture with me, but other people would just like walk up to me and just take a picture and then just walk away.
It's weird the way you're describing this, because in some ways you're like, yeah, we went to this super 1,000-year-old village. Walking into it is like time traveling. But these people have TVs and are watching shows that are dubbed in Mandarin and have cell phones, and
there's a lot
bizarre.
of flip phone happening too.
A lot of flip phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, part of me was like, are they taking a picture because it's like a curiosity, or are they taking a picture to report?
That would be a spooky idea too.
So I was just, so every time like we were kind of noticing, and oftentimes we did not spend very long in our kind of pit stop locations. We were kind of on the move pretty quickly.
Right.
So when we kept our plans very, very flexible.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, there's lots and lots of stories about that period in time.
Well, actually, let's go then back. So what time do we have? 25. Okay. Yeah, let's go back to the library then, because we have a lot to cover for the library too, from your guys' own podcast. Reread, rewrite, and recommend.
Yes. So that is our new podcast. And well, technically it's still new. And it is a lot about having conversations about books, and also learning a little bit about the library as well, or whomever the guest is. And it's kind of a cool premise. So the first of the R's for the book would be the recommend, which is your favorite book of all time, the book that you recommend to just anyone.
What's yours?
Mine is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. And I found that in a weird way because I read a lot. And so I was like, I don't know. Like, my current favorite, the one, I love the classics. I love all this. And so what I did to help myself is I actually asked my friends and family, I'm like, what book do you think of me? What book do you think is my favorite?
That's an interesting way to go about things.
Yeah. And they were like, 90% of them were like Goldfinch. The other person that didn't go with the Goldfinch was, it was still Donna Tartt. It was just A Secret History. So I was like, all right, so I'm like, and then the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, it is my favorite. So that's my favorite. That was my recommend. And then the rewrite is my favorite category, because that is where you get to pick a book or a series or something like that and talk about what you didn't like about it and what you would do differently.
Okay.
And it can go in any, you can do a total rewrite. It can just be about the cover art if you want. It can be about the audiobook version. It can be a whole bunch of different things, but it's just basically critiquing a book itself. And then so there's the recommend, rewrite, and then reread, which are books that you reread constantly, or a book that you have reread. And so that one was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I really enjoyed that book. And I reread it immediately after putting it down.
Really?
Yeah. So, but I had a few kind of like that, so I did some recommendations on that as well. I had a lot of fun when I was interviewed for it. Right now, so it's actually the host is Sarah Brinkman. She works in our outreach department, and so she is kind of going through and approaching different people who work at the library or associated with the library to do some interviews, and it kind of functions as reader's advisory and also just a way to get to know the library and the collection. So it's really
That's
fun.
Fascinating. I love the premise.
Yeah.
It's like a book club and a podcast.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And Sarah actually during the pandemic, she did this video series called Top 5 Live. And it was just about, hey, what are the top 5 books that I like right now? And I'm going to do it around a theme, and I'm going to talk about these books on this theme that I've identified. And it was successful. People really loved it. And then she and I were talking about it and the future of what that might look like. And she brought it. She's like, "What about a podcast?" I'm like, "This would be a perfect podcast. Let's do it." So we did it. And she's awesome at it. She knows a ton about books. She's constantly reading. Her reader's advisory, and I've said that twice now. Reader's advisory is just a fancy library way of saying recommending books to people based on their interests. So, but Sarah reads constantly. She consumes an incredible amount of books, and so she is just really solid at being able to talk about them and also recommending. And most likely she has either read that book or heard of the book that you're talking about. So anyway, she's incredible. I recommend checking it out.
I need to read more. I need to read a lot more.
We can help you.
I know.
Do you have a library card?
I do. Well,
there you go.
I really underuse the library. I that's what see when I hear about stuff like this, it makes me want to more.
Yeah.
I have I try to listen to a lot of books. Like I like audiobooks a lot. So I listen to those almost constantly.
Yeah.
I listen to those on a daily basis. But I don't have the time to sit down and just like straight read as much as I want to. But even though I like the feel
Absolutely
of reading a book better.
I'm the same way though. I mean, although I don't think I actually prefer the physical book. I love storytelling, and I was read to as a kid constantly. I was always into that. My parents actually even had like, it was a little traumatic actually when I think about it. Like they had Bambi on like a cassette or something or whatever it was. I don't know. And I just remember like being in bed as a kid, and then like Bambi's mom dies, and I'm just like sitting in bed like, bah, crying and. So, but I still really like audiobooks. I like being read to, and the performance is something that I really enjoy. So I actually, if you're into audiobooks, one of the things that I recommend for a lot of my friends, because I'm attached to my phone all the time, would be, there's 2 apps that the library has for audiobooks and ebooks, and on one of them there's movies and TV and all this kind of stuff, and music too. So the first one, the original is called Libby, and that's just Libby, formerly known as Overdrive, and that is probably our most popular digital content service that we have right now, and you get to check out just from thousands of titles. There's tons of ebooks and audiobooks all through the app, and you just use your library card, download the app, log in with your library card, and then you just have free access to all of these incredible audiobooks or ebooks. I even have mine set up to where my preferences filter out all the ebooks, and it's just audiobooks that I see. So it really is just like a free Audible.
I want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I canceled my Audible subscription because I was like, well, I'm finding tons to read here. And on Libby through Overdrive, you're going to see a lot more of like the big name authors. Okay. Really, really popular New York Times best-selling type of stuff, super current. There is some backlog as well, like, some older titles, some stuff that people might still want, or, completing of a series and things like that. But then there's also another service called Hoopla, which is also just really fun to say. And they offer audiobooks, ebooks, television shows, and movies and comic books and music. So it's like a whole library collection almost. That's really right cool. In there. The main difference is that within Overdrive and Libby, our librarians go in and specifically curate and purchase titles. So if there's something you're looking for and you want it in digital form, you can also, contact the library and say, hey, is this an option to be able to get on, on Libby in audiobook or something like that. And so it's really built and catered to our community specifically, because it's built by the people that are here. Like, right. There are people who are building those collections. Excuse me. And then in Hoopla, it's more of a subscription to where we basically are paying for access for all of our patrons. And it's really similar. You just download the app and use your library card to sign in, and then you can check out anything. The cool thing about Hoopla is that everything is always available all the time. There's no waiting at all.
Okay.
So when you go in, everything you see you can check out right now, as long as you have enough checkouts remaining for the month, and they reset every month as well. Whereas with Libby, you may have to place a hold on something. Okay. So it functions a lot more like a physical item. At first, when I was using Libby, I was like, this is digital. It doesn't make any sense. Why can't it just be available right now?
Is it about the licensing?
Yep. It's the publishers. It is absolutely the publishers.
I wondered how you guys were doing that. Like, if it was competing with Netflix or, not with Libby, but like with Hoopla. But competing directly with Audible and that kind of thing. Or if you guys were able to do all of this, like have such big names, because... Yeah,
and there are authors though that publishers that don't allow public libraries to purchase their titles. So sometimes you will find that you can only get the ebook or you can only get the audiobook because the owner of the rights or the licensing is different on the different type of media. So it's like produced by versus published by. There's a lot, digital books. If you were to buy it on Amazon as like a private citizen, your cost is much lower. There's also licensing that expires, for example. So like you may purchase access to that title for, I don't know, like a limited number of checkouts or a limited number of months or something like that as well. So they can kind of, and then if we want to keep it, then we have to go back in and buy it again, to provide that access to people. So it is kind of the wild, wild west right now. Overdrive was one of the big driving forces behind that. And then Hoopla has come in. There's some other, access out there. And there's a lot of people out there who are a lot smarter than I am, working with the publishers and legislation and stuff like that, trying to get this to be a little bit more equitable. I think partly is that a lot of the companies don't necessarily understand the relationship in how the library functions with like the economy and the market of publishing and books, that it stimulates that as opposed to taking the money away,
right?
Just because it gets people reading, gets people interested. We're the place where people come to get recommendations and figure out what they want to read. And I know like if I read a book that I really, really love, I might go buy that,
right?
Because I want it for myself to kind of keep and just have on hand. So there's some interesting things. I expect it to be continually evolving for quite some time, just because it is really new, and libraries jumped on really, really quickly with that as well. But it is challenging having Amazon as your competitor in many ways. Part of it is a lot of the brick and mortar bookstores went out of business largely because of Amazon. And so, the public libraries are definitely still thriving even with that. And I think it's because of what we provide to the community it's not only books and materials. It's also about like that connection and the reader's advisory that I talked about.
Right.
And, just having that space and that sense of community to really connect people, with each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about the library is the historical, like the local history section. I've been through that quite a bit. Because it's really hard to find similar things around. Like you have to curate it yourself and go to different people, and you have to know the people who have it. Whereas the library just has, a lot of interesting stuff around Zanesville. But I'd like that there's something like the library. Well, it is the library now, but like something like a physical library digitally through Libby and Hoopla, because there's one thing, like YouTube is great for learning things, but a lot of times you can only get like so deep into something. You can get a good understanding of the basics very quickly, but as soon as you want to go comprehensive, you have to get a book, or a full teacher. But where there's no teacher around, you have to get a book. And so being able to go, and books are expensive. Especially like for me, when I want to learn, I do software development most of the time. So if I want to learn something like that, a lot of those books cost like $150, $200, and
and actually, that is something that we've recently addressed as well. Because there's a lot of we can't have everything, in the collection, which is one reason why we joined the Search Ohio and Ohio Link Consortium to be able to bring in like specific titles as well. So like even if you can't find something in our collection, we have access to over 60 million more items from across Ohio.
That's awesome.
That you can order in, and that includes academic libraries as well. So you can get some of those academic titles to help support our students just a little bit more. And you were talking about YouTube and learning. And I do a lot of learning on YouTube as well. Like if I need to know how to do something, that's what I'm going into, which is why I think YouTube is the second most popular or used search engine.
Yeah.
So we have something called LinkedIn Learning, which used to be called lynda.com.
Right.
But LinkedIn Learning is video training for a variety of subjects. And this would be like an opportunity to consume and learn that information through video with professionals and do a deep dive. And you can get free access to that with your library card, again, through our website, and you can search in. I mean, that's where I stay current on all of my like software, so something, if I have a question or I want to learn more about like something that's happening in the Adobe suite, I pop in there, type in what I want to learn, and I can either find a whole course on it, or I can find like a specific little video because they're chopped into small consumable bites. So you could complete an entire course in like 5-minute chunks.
I did used to use Lynda all the time.
Yeah.
And probably still would if I could maintain enough subscriptions, or now I can again.
Yeah, now you can.
I actually did. I read about that a little, just like a month ago, that you guys had that. And so I've been eyeballing that too when I have a little bit more time to get into some new hobbies and stuff. But we don't have too much more time till you have to get going. What are some of your other favorite programs at the library that you really want to highlight before we have to end it?
So one of the things that I definitely want to talk about, one of our signature programs, which is actually wrapping up right now, is our summer reading. And recently we've opened that up to all ages as well. And we're kind of continually looking at ways at engaging people, within our community to promote literacy across all ages, and to really strengthen and enrich our community. And we actually we're so close to having 1,700 people registered for our summer reading program this year.
Wow.
And while that is great, one of the things we're very excited about is we have almost 1.1 million minutes read in Muskingum County during our summer reading this year. And we are so thrilled to see that. I just learned that number today. The engagement on our summer reading is just incredible. It's so important for students, and especially, the little readers, to prevent what's called summer slide. Where basically students are like losing ground on their education during the summer months. But summer reading helped prevent that. And I also love that we're engaging adults in it now as well, so that people, we can serve that part of our community. And I think that if kids grow up in houses where family members read, that they are far more likely to want to read themselves and, engage with literacy and becoming lifelong learners, which is ultimately, one of our large goals. So I would say summer reading is something we always are excited about. Coming up, we do have our community read as well, which is kind of, I jokingly call it summer reading for adults, which I can't say now because summer reading's for everyone. But it is just a really, it's something we've done for the past few years. And it is where we bring in a bigger name author, like a national, best-selling author, and we purchase some of their books so that we can hand them out for people to keep. And basically, the whole premise is that we want our community to be reading one or a grouping of books so that we can kind of foster communication. Because if you've ever run into someone who's read one of the books that you've read or is reading a book that you're currently reading, it's a really wonderful way to connect with them. And I think that right now, as restrictions are being lifted, it's even more important to be able to have that common ground to be able to kind of re-engage with our community. And I think that our community read is a beautiful way to do that. Last year was the 50th anniversary of the Kent State tragedy. And because, of course, what we were going through as a nation, as a world, we weren't able to really, honor that. And so this year's community read is about the Kent State shootings, you know, and the tragedy that happened up there over 50 years ago, and how some of those conversations and ideas are still relevant, you know, to the culture that we live in now. And, you know, it's very, very local as well. So we're going to be bringing in some people, and we're going to talk about some books about, you know, the Kent State coming up here pretty soon. And then next year, keep your eye out. We're hoping to continue our community read for many years to come.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Absolutely.
It was really, really fun.
Time flew.
It did fly.
Yeah.
It flew very quickly. And unfortunately, because there's more I wanted to actually talk about, but we'll have to do that at a different time.
What time is it?
It's about 2 right now.
What are the other topics?
I really wanted to go more into some of the different programs, like summer reading and stuff like that. But
we can do a part 2.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, we'll do a sequel.